On today's show, the Cavs take on the Milwaukee Bucks on Sunday in what is their most interesting game of the weekend. So I brought in Tony Cartagena, former Cavs beat writer and current host of Thanalysis. Guys around the Milwaukee Bucks all the time. So what should we expect on Sunday? Plus, what would a potential playoff series in the second round between the Cavs and the Bucks look like? We discuss that and so much more on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cavaliers, places like 92.3 The Fan, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today. And every day you can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching the show on YouTube, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In today's episode, of course, brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. On today's show, Tony Cartagena. Some of you might know him. He used to cover the Cavs for ESPN Cleveland back during the second LeBron era. Now he lives in Milwaukee and hosts the Thanalysis podcast with Thanalysis and Antetokounmpo. So he's very clued into what is going on with the Milwaukee Bucks. So we talked to him about how the Bucks look different after they traded Chris Middleton for Kyle Kuzma. They're a much different team. They've been playing better basketball, even if it has been against a little bit of a light schedule as of late. And we also talked about later in the podcast, what would a series look like between the Cavs and Bucks? I think it's one that the Cavs would certainly be favored in. They'll be favored at any series in the Eastern Conference against a team other than the Boston Celtics. But how would that series shake out? How long do we think it would go? If these two teams were put together in a draft, how many Cavs would go before the second member of the Bucks is picked? So we dove into a lot of that stuff. Thought it's a really good episode. I do think you'll enjoy it. So before I get to Tony, make sure you hit that thumbs up button if you're watching on YouTube. And if you are listening via podcast, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts as well. But without anything else from me, here's my conversation with Tony Cartagena. And welcome back to the show. Tony Cartagena, one-time guest, now a two-time guest, covers the Milwaukee Bucks. And we're going to talk about that team because that is a team that the Cavs could conceivably play in the second round of the playoffs. They obviously play for the fourth and final time this Sunday. The Cavs have won the first three matchups. I think it's been really interesting to see where the Bucks have been throughout the course of those three matchups. The two games earlier in the season, I think the vibes were very off and very weird and very strange in Milwaukee. And then after that, the Bucks kind of turned it around, made a run into the in-season tournament. And since then, they've made a pretty big trade. They've been playing better basketball as of lately. Tony, this just really feels like it's been, I think, a strange season in Milwaukee is probably the best way to put it.
Well, I got to first correct you on one thing. It's not the in-season tournament anymore. The Milwaukee Bucks were NBA Cup champions. I'm going to need you.
Oh, that's what it is.
Yes. If you could redo that introduction for me and say the Cleveland Cavaliers on Sunday will be playing the current fifth seed in NBA Cup champ. It's your show. You know, you can do it all you want, but that's how I
think you can tell how much the NBA Cup matters to me personally by that oversight.
Well, yeah,
it was a nice win over Oklahoma City they had in the title game, though.
It was. None of the stats counted, or however that all shakes out for postseason awards and things like that. Either way, I want to say the first two times the Bucks played the Cavs, Giannis didn't play in Cleveland, and the game in Milwaukee was close. It came down to a Donovan Mitchell heroic shot right after, I believe it was Dame hit a Dame time type shot. So, like, that's two heavyweights, right? That you kind of count that game as a wash. When Giannis doesn't play, nothing matters. And that's not like a slight at anyone else on the team, but like if LeBron doesn't play when he was in Cleveland, right? Like Kyrie and Kevin Love, as good as they were, the game is just different. The game plan is just different. So the Bucks Cavs this week, I do hope that both teams are at full strength, right? Because I think that'll give you like a good, I hate the sports cliche, but like it is a good measuring stick for how things are. Like Cavs, Boston the other night, right? Boston comes out hot. The Cavs, very mature, just kind of withstood that and end up getting the victory. Like that was a great NBA regular season game. The Bucks had one the other day. It was a bout. with Denver in Milwaukee. They went back and forth, and it was just little leads. Like the Bucks would go up by 6, or Denver would be up by 5, but the Bucks would battle back. And the Bucks ended up winning that one late after some Giannis heroics, where he hit a 3, then he had a dunk, then he had a mid-range, then he had another dunk, and like he just kind of pulled out the full arsenal late in the fourth quarter against Denver, where you can see with the Bucks, to get back to your original question, like you can see where this team has the potential to be. When they're playing a good team, they show up. Like they show up, and for the most part, I know they had a blowout against the Knicks, and there's been some games, but like for the most part, when they're playing a really good, high caliber team, they show up. The part with the Bucks that has been frustrating for fans, or just like that, where something like looks off, is the clunker they'll put together against a not so competitive team on the random Tuesday night, right? Or they're playing a team on the second end of a back-to-back, and it's like, this game should not be this close. But that's just been what Bucks basketball has been this year. And I do think I will stand by it. The trade, Chris Middleton hurt because of who he is. But if it was anyone else and you were getting back Kyle Kuzma, fans wouldn't have been so like, oh, this is a bad. Like people were hating on Kuz as soon as the Bucks traded for him. Like Kuz is a ball player. He can play offense. He's younger-ish for the Bucks. And that
for
worked.
the Bucks, I don't know that I'd call him younger-ish for the NBA, but for the Bucks,
no, but like for the
he's
Bucks roster, his youth in that locker room is a little bit different than what they've had, and just his athleticism, being almost 6'10", right? So like he offers so much that they didn't have before, and that's not a slight against Chris. It's just where they are in their careers, right? So the Bucks are playing really, really good basketball, and I'll stand by it. I wouldn't raise my hand to play them if they're healthy in the postseason. And Danny, you know how it goes when you have guys that get hurt. Kevin Love gets hurt. Kyrie Irving gets hurt. The Cavs are no longer NBA championship contenders, right? In 2015, 2016, that era. But the Bucks have been one of the two, if not the most competitive team in the East year in and year out since 2019. They've just had really bad luck with injuries and COVID. In 19, people forget they were popping teams by 20 left and right. Like they were, That's the year they were supposed to win a championship. The bubble doesn't matter. They win it the next year, and then Middleton gets hurt, and then Giannis gets hurt the next 2 years. But like they've been right there every single year, despite what round they went out in or whatever. If this team is fully healthy, like no one should want to play Milwaukee.
So I do want to talk about the Kuzma acquisition, because obviously like that is the biggest difference in that team from the time that the Cavs last played them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was late December, early January, that like they are just fundamentally a different team. So he's played, as we record this, and it's Monday afternoon. I don't know when you're listening to this. I haven't decided when it's going to come out, but we're recording this Monday afternoon. So as of now, Kyle Kuzma's played 10 games with the Bucks. What have your initial impressions of him been, aside from being younger than everybody else in that locker room, despite the fact that he's not exactly young? He's, in what year is this for him? I mean, he's almost 30 years old.
It's got to be year 8 or so for him, I'm guessing. He had a little bit of a
year
college
8.
What I've seen from them is someone that when the ball is in his hands late in the game, they have to respect. The opposing team has to respect. And you always had that with Chris Middleton a little bit, but with him, you kind of knew what he was going to. In his bag, if he got it on the block, that's a little bit different. If he got it around the perimeter, you kind of knew 2 dribbles to the right where he was going to try to get to, right? With Kuzma, he does have an ability to get to the rim. He has the ability to shoot when called upon. And at the end of the day, like you have to respect him as a scorer in the NBA. And I think sometimes teams overlook, like you have all-time great NBA players who are great at basketball, and then sometimes you just got people who can score the basketball, right? And Kuzma, to me, is one of those guys, when you need a bucket, he can get you a bucket. Some of the all-time greats are like that. T-Mac was like that. I'm not comparing the two, but just like at some point, like you need someone to just go get you a bucket at any given time. Kuzma can do it. And that as a third option is super dangerous. So when I look at what they've been able to do with him, they've kind of taken out the approach of like the Bucks under Doc Rivers were kind of playing like those 08 Celtics. They have vets, and then they had a point guard who can defend anybody, and that was Andre Jackson Jr. He's unfortunately for him, he's kind of found himself on the lower ends of minutes since they got Kuzma and Kevin Porter Jr. and Jericho Sims. And they've kind of just taken we're going to defend you and win games 102 to 100 to, all right, we got to score 130. Let's put up 130. and that's what they've done.
So with the Kuzma thing, do you worry offensively? Like I know you mentioned the ability to go get a bucket. It looks much different than what Chris Middleton did. But with Giannis, who, his mid-range jumper has been, I think, much better this year than it has been in years past. He's really not shooting threes. Of course, Damian Lillard is going to be somebody that does create a ton of space. Brook Lopez creates space because he's going to hang out 35 feet from the basket, it feels like, and just bomb away from there. But the fact that Kuzma is not a very good three-point shooter, you're going from somebody in Middleton who, albeit in a limited sample size because of injuries this year, was shooting 40% from deep, to a guy that's shooting under 30% from deep. Is that something that concerns you there?
No, because I think percentages are fluid, right? I do think if you have an open spot up three, I think is someone, I don't mind him taking that shot. And I do think when you go from the position that he was in Washington, I look more, if you want to look at what you think Kuzma can be in terms of a spot up shooter and a guy as a third option, look more at his Lakers film than anything, because that's someone who, he wasn't the number one option. In Washington, it was kind of more of a free flowing offense, and he was there to score. And like, he was the first or second option on that team. Here, you're going to see him have probably the third best wing defender or third best defender on the court at any time defending him. And so if he gets those open looks, I'm okay with him taking that. I'm also okay with Kuzma being a guy who you respect enough that you close out on him, and he takes one dribble to the right, puts his head down and gets to the rim, gets and one, or gets 2 free throws out of it. So like, I'm really comfortable with him being a significant option in their offense.
Today's show brought to you by Prize Picks. Basketball season, well, it's heating up, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you just click more or less on at least 2 player projections for a shot to win up to 1,000 times. Wow, 1,000 times your cash. It's easy to use, available in over 30 states, and it lets you mix and match projections across different sports. Doesn't have to be all basketball. If you're listening to this podcast, basketball might be what you know best, but it doesn't have to be all basketball. Plus, it is quick and easy because Prize Picks makes it simple. You can set your lineup in less than 60 seconds and stay engaged all game long. When you win, your money hits your account in as little as 15 minutes, so there's no waiting around to be paid. You're going to get paid quickly. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA, that is LOCKEDON NBA, to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. So as we record this, Milwaukee is in 4th place in the Eastern Conference. They have the same record as the Indiana Pacers, but at this point, I would guess they hold the tiebreaker over the Pacers. I'm sure those two teams have a couple of games left that they still have to play, which, this could all shake out, but they have a 1-game lead over Detroit for 6. There's no way they, in my opinion, move up to 3. They're 5.5 back of the Knicks, and they have a big enough lead over 7th place Miami that they're going to be somewhere in that 4, 5, 6. So as you look at this from a Bucks perspective, which matchup do you think would best serve them in the first round? The options are Indiana, Detroit, and New York. Like, if you look at first round opponents for them, which matchup do you think serves them the best?
I mean, serves them the best, I would just naturally go with Detroit. And I say that as no disrespect to the Pistons, but just from a experience standpoint, sure. Indiana has done it before against Milwaukee. So in their head, it's a little bit different. Right now, Indiana this year is not playing like Indiana's of years past. And when Indiana could possibly see the Bucks this time around, Giannis, knock on wood, is healthy. Dame isn't playing hobbled as he did throughout that entire series last year. People forget. Also, Chris Middleton's not out there on 2 sprained ankles. Their top 3 options last year were extremely, extremely hurt. So if the Bucks are healthy, I think the Indiana matchup is good. I do think the Pistons matchup, because they are mostly led by guys. I know Malik Beasley's been there with the Bucks before. Tobias Harris has been there before. But because for the most part, they're led by younger guys. I would think the experience that Milwaukee has preparing for a postseason run, Detroit just doesn't want to deal with that. And so that's the one if I had to pick who's most favorable, I'd go with Detroit. I leave the Knicks out of it. I think the world of Jalen Brunson. Josh Hart, give me 5 of him all day long.
Right.
And just they're a really, really good team. I was doing a show with Thanalysis the other day, and we were talking about third options in the NBA. And Right? For the Bucks, you got Kuz, you got Brook, and then you look at the Knicks, and all right, you know who your top two scorers are in Cat and Jalen Brunson, and then it's like Josh Hart's a good third option, but they also got OG, and they also they just have a cast there that and they have a coach who's done it before. You also just don't want to deal with the Knicks fans, right? Like first round, let's just get a victory. Honestly, the vibes are different in New York City when you're playing at the Garden. So for the Bucks who have been bounced in the first two rounds the last two seasons, if they go in fully healthy, I just want something chill, something easier where you can just not have to deal with Spike Lee, not have to deal with the Knicks fans and that energy they're going to bring, because Knicks fans will celebrate a first round victory like they just won the Super Bowl every single time. So I get it. I respect it. I just don't want to deal with it.
Right. And how much too of the seeding? So for them to see the Knicks, they'd have to fall to 6. And I do think that their upcoming schedule, it's not some crazy thing that the Pistons do finish with a better record than the Bucks or the Pacers for that matter. One of the Pistons could very easily, I think, be in that 4-5 matchup. But let me read you the next 11 games starting against the Cavs. So, depending on when this comes out, there are a couple of games that the Bucks play before then, but they play the Cavs on Sunday, in Indy Tuesday, the Lakers, Indy, OKC, Golden State, the Lakers again, Sacramento, Phoenix, who I don't know that I've ever seen an NBA team with worse vibes than the Suns right now, Denver, and then New York. That is the 11-game stretch that I think is really going to define what this season looks like in terms of where they finish in the standings. Not that they're going to move up, but are they going to fall to 6th? That is the stretch that I think everyone's going to look at for them.
So essentially, it's do they go 7-4 or 4-7 over that stretch, right? And if they
I think anything's possible there. I think they could go 7-4. I think they could go 4-7.
Yeah, I don't think they'll go 4-7. I think they'll be closer to 500. Either way, this is a super defining stretch, and Giannis is still on a minutes restriction as of right now, but we'll see what happens with that. But this is what you get yourself in position for. But this is also why, this is why I feel really good about the Bucks going into the playoffs, because they're going to be so battle tested and knock on wood healthy. And then once you get through this stretch, you kind of coast, and then you don't end up in the play-in, and then you have a little bit more rest time. But this is why those early season losses, where they started off 2-8, something like that.
I think 2-12, something it was bad.
They started off, less than ideal. But this is where when people are like, it's only November, we do this in baseball all the time, and you're a small market baseball team fan too, like I am. You get close, and then at the end, they're just you got to win two of the next 3 to get into the playoffs. It's if you would have put a little more leverage or a little more thought into the April game, or in basketball's case, into the November game, you wouldn't be in this spot. So the Bucks have been digging themselves out of a hole this entire season. But if you take away the first month and a half of the season, they're one of the best teams in basketball. So I would say in this stretch, they probably go somewhere around 7-4 and remain consistent to where they're at.
Right. I mean, it's the old saying that is, rings true, I think, in baseball, probably a little bit more than this sport. You can't win the division in April, but you can lose the division in April. And the Milwaukee Bucks lost the division in October, November. That's when you get off to a 2-8 start, especially in, I don't think anyone saw the Cavs being as historically good as they've been in terms of starting 15-0. They're on pace to win 67, 68 games. And in the Bucks, I don't think we're ever going to win at that clip in the regular season, no matter what their start was this year. But when they started 2-8, it was over from their standpoint just at that point. So let's say they go 7. Go on.
I was going to say, is this the best regular season Cavs team that you've seen?
Yes. They are historically good.
So you do understand what I'm asking you there. Is this team better than any team in the regular season LeBron led?
In the regular season, yes. So the 2008-2009 Cavs team won 66 games, and that team was really good. But can you name, and I know you know your stuff, can you name who the second option on that Cavs team was?
What year did you say?
2008-2009.
It was Gibson, right?
No, it was Mo Williams. I believe Mo Williams was an all-star that year. That's what the Cavs. It was LeBron was so good.
Boobie Gibson was on the 07 finals team.
He was there, but he wasn't the second option. He just had a couple of really big playoff games. Mo Williams was an all-star.
When I covered the Cavs, I did a show once where I said at the trade deadline, where I said if they sign Mo Williams, they'll win a title in 2015. Just because I thought he would be a good backup point guard, not knowing they really could have used him after Kyrie went down. But
And then
man,
they
Mo
signed
Williams,
him in 2016.
yeah, they were just a year late on him. But Mo Williams blast from the past there. Anyways, yeah, I was just thinking about the Cavs and how like no one talks about them whatsoever, but like they're clearly playing really, really good basketball. And I assume there were some LeBron teams that got into the high 60s in terms of wins, or mid 60s, whatever. But just like,
So
man,
there were two. It was that team, the 08-09, and then 09-2010, LeBron's last year in Cleveland before leaving for Miami. That team won 60 games exactly. Won 66 in 09, won 60 in 2010. But you look at just like by net rating. So that 08-09 team had a net rating of 10, which is really, really good. This Cavs team is plus 11.5. Like they are one of the 10 best regular season teams ever by just about every metric.
Interesting. It's going to suck for you when they lose in the second round of Milwaukee, huh?
Well, let's talk about that. So let's say the Bucks go 7-4 in that stretch of 11 games that we just talked about a little bit. And maybe Detroit cools off a little bit, because I do think it's fair to say they're playing a little bit over their heads. It's been a great story, but they're playing a little bit over their heads right now for the Pistons. So let's say that they're in the 4-5 matchup against Indiana, and they get revenge for what happened last year when Giannis, did he not play in that whole series, or did he just miss most of it? He didn't play in the whole series.
He got hurt with like 3 weeks left to go in the regular season, then didn't play basketball again competitively until the Olympics.
And then Damian Lillard missed time in that series, and even when he was on the floor,
I want to say he missed 2 games, but probably shouldn't have been in like 3 or 4 of those.
Right. He never looked like Damian Lillard in that series. So let's say they get revenge there, and whoever the Cavs play coming out of the play-in, like that's just not going to be a long series. They're going to be able to quickly dismiss Orlando, Miami, Chicago, or Atlanta. Like that's just going to be a close series. So let's say that these two teams match up. How do you view the Milwaukee Bucks matching up with the Cleveland Cavaliers in a potential Eastern Conference semifinal series?
I think it's great, just because the way I look at the matchups is the Bucks have more length than I think people realize. So they're going to have Bobby Portis back for the playoffs. And the Cavaliers, when you talk about defense, obviously you have Mobley and you have Jared Allen, right? Like those guys are going to be – it's really hard to defend Giannis, Brook, and Bobby, all 7-footers, all down low, right? So like the Bucks, more than other teams, I think have capable scoring to throw at the Cavs in different waves. Not to say like – I know Allen and Mobley are good defenders, but like – it's relentless. And then now they're bringing in Jericho Sims off the bench, who's going to have a ton of energy, and the way he's been able to kind of work that pick and roll game. So like, I think it starts there, and Doc Rivers can obviously develop a game plan to really slow it down and try to work down low and exhaust and get your guys in foul trouble. But then too, at the top of the key, like I mentioned Kuzma, just his ability to score the basketball. I still take Dame Lillard. I know, the Cavs are playing well. I still take Dame Lillard as someone who can score with just about anybody in the NBA, just because of his ability to shoot from distance, right? So if Mitchell or Garland want to get up in him and they're really pushing him, I still think Dame can – he might have the most efficient shooting nights in the world, and depending on pace is whether or not that matters. But, like, I still like that matchup. The Bucks, I think, to beat Cleveland would probably have to go back closer to their – slow it down mentality that they took earlier in the season. And I think they're more than capable of doing that. I don't see Cleveland as a team you want to get into a track meet with, especially with like your new addition. You give me a random DeAndre Hunter playoff game where he has, 16, I'm going to be really annoyed. He's
averaging almost 20. He had 32,
but how
Donovan Mitchell didn't play. But like, I think
but you know how playoff rotations,
especially if he's coming off of the bench, like I think he's going to average 15 a night in the postseason.
In the postseason, where every
he's coming off the bench, because he's going to play 30 minutes and he's going to get a ton of open threes.
Well, if you're giving him 30 minutes, that's fine. If you're
that's what he's going to play.
If you're sticking truer to like how the NBA historically has had playoff rotations of longer stretches for starters and things like that, and guys coming off the bench don't play those as long as they do in the regular season. But if he's getting 30 minutes off the bench, like the Cavs will be super annoying. But the Bucks have added so much that I do think like it's just going to be back and forth. Who's going to have the ball last, but who can make the best adjustments, I think, over the course of what for sure will be a 6 or 7 game series.
Today's show brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the action is just getting started. And there's no better place to get in on that action than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. Plus, if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. FanDuel's live betting feature keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether you're backing your team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. You never have to feel like you missed your chance, right? There's always something to get in on with FanDuel. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, because listen, if you listen to this show, I like to think you're smart. So when you win, not if, when you win, you get paid instantly. And right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com, FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. I think that it's probably a 6-game series, but I don't think Milwaukee can score enough with the Cavs the way that I look at it right now. And the Cavs defense has been much better than it was earlier in the season. Like, and you think back to those the two games we talked about between Milwaukee and the Cavs that were both close games. And a big reason why those games were close was Milwaukee shot above 50% from three in each of those games. Like they entered those games not shooting the ball well, and they've been a really good 3-point shooting team really since those games. Like that was a turning point for them offensively, but the Cavs gave up so many open looks and they've not done that since. Like their defense has been so much better, not only just since the DeAndre Hunter acquisition, but really since the calendar turned to February. They've been really good on that end of the floor. And
the Bucks have been really good at creating their own shots too. Like, and they're playing really, really good defense. That's why I think it actually would be like a really solid matchup. And then when you get some of the shooters, like you get your AJ Green off the bench, like he's going to hit a couple threes per game, right? And he's going to frustrate the heck out of your guys. But like at the end of the day, it's the NBA, right? Who are the top 3 players in that series?
So I think the top 3 players is probably 1 member of the Bucks and 2 members of the Cavs. I think Giannis is, like, if you're drafting players, Giannis is the first pick in that series, no question.
And Donovan goes second.
Probably the first pick in any series in the Eastern Conference in terms of Giannis. Yeah. I think either Donovan or Evan Mobley is second, and I think the other one is third. Like, I think that is how that goes out.
That's where I would take Damian Lillard in a heartbeat over
Mobley. I might take Darius Garland over Damian Lillard with the year that Garland has had this year.
You just brought up what Damian Lillard was able to do in the playoffs last year, hobbled against. He had 30 and 1.5. Like,
right. I'm not saying he's not a good player.
No,
I'm not saying he's not a good player.
But like when it's time to deliver, I don't know. I feel like that's interesting because at the end of the day, how many NBA playoff series come down to who are the 3 of the best player, who has the 3 best players in the series, right? Like that often is the case when you have teams that are a little more star heavy than team built. In this scenario, I think you have 2 really, really well put together teams, and it could be a wash either way, but I think it'd be competitive. The Bucks have also shown over the past couple of weeks, as I mentioned earlier, like they're cool getting into a track meet. Like they're not scared of that anymore as I think they were, because now they added 2 legitimate scorers. They added 2 buckets with Kevin Porter Jr. and Kyle Kuzma, which I think is great when, 6 weeks ago or a month ago when this team would get into track meets, they could run out of gas because Brook Lopez is a little bit older and didn't hit threes in the fourth quarter, or Bobby Portis was that 3rd or 4th option, depending on what the rotation looked like. Now those guys drop down a little bit in the rotation, and you get some help hitting threes off the bench with AJ Green and Kevin Porter Jr., what he's been able to do. Like, I'm not scared of a track meet. I don't love it, but I'm not scared of it.
So interesting enough, like both these teams, they are currently 8th and 9th in pace in the NBA. It's a really, really similar number. Like there's basically no difference between the 2 speeds that these 2 teams play at. It's just that the Cavs maximize their possessions, I think, at a much better clip than the Bucks do, because their offensive rating is 122.3, which is it's literally the best offense in NBA history statistically, and the Bucks are almost 10 points behind that. Like I think Milwaukee's defense can be really good. I think Giannis would be the best player in that series, but I just don't see how Milwaukee can score enough to keep up with the Cavs and win 4 games in 7 series. Like Giannis would have to, I think, have multiple 50-point games for Milwaukee to get past them. which could happen. Like he's
Like,
really, really good.
Honestly, if there's one guy who in the NBA right now who you're like, hey, you got to go for 50 tonight to get the win. Like, all right, give me Giannis.
It could happen.
But also for him to go for 50,
like,
it's a slower paced game. Despite him leading the league, I think, in fast break points. Which is a weird stat, but I don't need to get off on that tangent.
The way that, I mean, we don't necessarily need to talk about that, but the way that fast break points are tabulated it's just not, I don't think that is done.
It's basically if you have an advantage, right? Like you could be running a 5-on-4, and I think they count that.
But like if you're just moving quick and there's no advantage, it doesn't count. Like it's.
Bro, did you see that clip the other day of that Jokic assist?
I did not.
The Nuggets, I want to go back and look. So the Nuggets posted this video, and they were like, Jokic, I think he had like 19 assists in a game or something, like a wild number. He's obviously one of the best players in the world. But the video they posted to go with the caption was like, he kicked it out. Somebody took 2 dribbles to get into the lane and then did like a Euro.
Oh, I did see this. This was not an assist.
I think the person who posted a really good video and then had that caption. I don't think that was counted as an assist, because if it did, then I need to go back into my stats and add on a lot of assists to the career there. So either way, just a random stats are funny. You can kind of paint them either way. I do think Bucks Cavs. I'm trying to think of what I think a better matchup would be in all of the NBA playoffs. I know Cleveland, Boston has some people excited. Milwaukee, Denver, after watching them the other night, has me excited. I think Bucks Cavs will be it'll be a Tank Davis style fight, right? Like we're going to come down to the final here, and we're going to see what happens.
Well, I don't know who Tank Davis is, so
I don't
watch
me?
boxing or MMA. I don't watch combat sports.
Lord.
I have no idea. I have no idea.
You have no idea. Don't you use the internet? Like you're a sports nerd. You didn't see anything about that come across any of your feeds.
Not a word. Never heard. I would have guessed Tank Davis was a linebacker for the Packers, the way that you said it. The Tony Cartagena does a great job covering the Milwaukee Bucks over at Thanalysis with Thanalysis and Antetokounmpo. Make sure you give that a listen wherever you get your podcast, and YouTube as well. Make sure you give Locked On Cavs a listen anywhere you get your podcast. YouTube as well. Drops a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs, and I will be back tomorrow talking more about the Cleveland Cavaliers.